The autumn wind carried the smell of dust and wood smoke through Dodge Creek, a town barely big enough to warrant its name. The main street was nothing more than a row of false front buildings, a saloon with squeaking doors, a general store with barrels of flowers stacked out front, a chapel whose bell marked the hours, and the sheriff's office, a single-room building with a barred window. Life here was slow, predictable, and hard. Families scraped by on ranching, hunting, and trade. People knew each other's business. And in a place like Dodge Creek, children were everyone's children. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in streaks of orange and violet, 3 boys played near the livery stable. Their shouts echoed down the dirt street as they kicked around a ragged leather ball, laughing, tumbling, and daring one another in the dust. Among them was Samuel Grady. Only 8 years old, Samuel was wiry and restless, with straw blonde hair that stuck up in tufts and freckles spread across his nose. He was the sort of boy who could never stay still long, always chasing after something just out of reach. The bell from St. Mary's Chapel rang 6, its solemn toll rolling across the town. Families were settling into supper, mothers calling their children indoors. Samuel's friends remembered the moment clearly. Samuel catching his breath, clutching the ball, and saying he needed to fetch something from the creek before heading home. And then he was gone. No one saw him again that night. When Samuel failed to return home, his mother lit a lantern on the porch and called his name into the dusk. At first, she thought nothing of it. Boys were often late, distracted by games, frogs in the creek, or pockets to fill with stones and feathers. But when supper grew cold and his bed remained empty, worry spread to the Grady household like wildfire. By nightfall, the family had gone door to door, asking neighbors if they had seen Samuel. Word traveled quickly, and soon Dodge Creek stirred. In a town where everyone knew everyone, a missing child was not just a family's loss. It was a whole town's crisis. Sheriff Elias Boone was roused from his office. A tall, grizzled man in his 50s, Boone carried himself with the slow weariness of a Civil War veteran. He had seen battlefields scarred by cannon fire, and the haunted look in his eyes suggested that what he had witnessed there never truly left him. Yet for all that, he was steady, a man people trusted when the world tipped into uncertainty. "Form a party," Boone said, voice gravelly, as he pulled on his coat. "Lanterns, horses, rifles if you must. We ride the creek first." That night, Dodge Creek lit up like a string of fireflies. Lanterns swung from saddles, boots crunched in the frost, and voices carried Samuel's name into the darkness. Coyotes howled on the prairie's edge, their calls too close for comfort. Mothers huddled on porches, shawls drawn tight, praying aloud as the search stretched into the cold hours before dawn. It was then, as the sun's first pale light crept over the cottonwoods, that they found it, Samuel's ragged leather ball, lying abandoned in the dust near the stable. Sheriff Boone crouched low, examining the earth. Tiny footprints, Samuel's, led away from the stable toward the creek. He followed them with careful steps, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. And then, abruptly, they ended. The soft earth gave way to deep wagon ruts, the kind made by heavy wheels pressing into damp soil. Boone stood silently, one hand resting on his knee, staring at the tracks that had swallowed the boy's trail whole. By morning, Dodge Creek was buzzing with rumor. In the saloon, men lowered their voices over glasses of whiskey. In the general store, women traded theories as they gathered flour and lamp oil. Everyone wanted to believe Samuel would be found, yet unease gnawed at them. Children did not vanish into thin air. Theories sprouted like weeds. The first pointed to a covered wagon. Several townsfolk swore they had seen a wagon leaving Dodge Creek at dusk, its canvas flapping in the wind, its driver lashing the horses hard. The man, identified as Jedediah Pike, was known for bartering cheap goods and keeping questionable company. If anyone had cause to steal a boy, one ranch hand muttered, it'd be Pike, a child worth a price to the wrong kind of men. The second suspicion, whispered with an edge of prejudice, fell on the Crow Reservation nearby. Old tensions lingered between the communities, and some were quick to cast blame without proof. Sheriff Boone dismissed such talk, unwilling to let fear breed false accusations. But the whisper spread all the same. And then there was a third theory, Boone's own discovery. He had gone back to the creek bed, lantern in hand, tracing the wagon ruts as far as he could. That was when he noticed them. A second set of tracks in the soft dirt. Not Samuel's. Not wagon wheels. Boot prints. Large. Too large for any ordinary man, and sunk deep into the earth as if the wearer carried great weight. They led west, away from the creek, toward the abandoned silver mine. Boone straightened slowly, lantern flickering in the rising wind. His face betrayed nothing, but his silence was telling. When a deputy asked if he thought the boy had been taken there, Boone gave no answer. He simply set his jaw, staring out toward the black silhouette of the mine against the evening sky. And so the whispers grew darker. The abandoned silver mine lay 2 miles west of town, its jagged entrance gaping like the mouth of a beast. Years earlier, a collapse had sealed off its inner tunnels, killing a handful of miners and cursing the place in the minds of Dodge Creek citizens. Children were warned never to go near it. Men avoided it after sundown. But now, Sheriff Boone had no choice. He arrived at dusk with a posse of 6 townsmen, lanterns in one hand, rifles in the other. The air grew colder near the mine, and the light seemed to dim, swallowed by the black rock that loomed above them. Boone's deputy muttered a prayer as the sheriff stepped forward. "Keep your eyes sharp," Boone said, voice low. "We're not just hunting shadows." The mine swallowed them whole. Inside, the air was damp and stale, carrying the bitter tang of rust. Their lanterns cast trembling light over walls scarred with old pick marks and timbers that groaned under invisible weight. The men moved slowly, boots crunching on gravel, every sound echoing too loudly. Then Boone stopped. Something fluttered in the lantern light. A scrap of cloth, pale and frayed, snagged on a nail jutting from a support beam. Boone lifted it, turning it over in his hand. Small, torn, could have been from a child's shirt. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Deeper still, near a broken cartwheel, they found something worse. Half buried in the dirt lay a tin whistle, dented and dull with grime. Boone picked it up, wiped it on his sleeve, and held it close to the lantern. His face tightened. Samuel's whistle. His mother had given it to him last spring. The men shifted uneasily. One swore he heard something, a faint sound like crying, echoing from deeper in the tunnels. Another said he felt a draft, though the air should have been still. Boone ordered them further in, but soon the path narrowed, blocked by a cave-in. With no sign of the boy beyond the whistle and the cloth, they turned back, their departure marked by silence heavier than before. That night, in the saloon, whispers took on a new edge. Some claimed the mine had never stopped taking lives, that its tunnels reached further than men knew. Others swore Boone had looked shaken, something no one had ever seen before. If the mine offered no answers, then suspicion fell elsewhere. Word spread of the wagon that had left Dodge Creek on the very evening Samuel vanished. Its driver, Jedediah Pike, was a gaunt man with sunken eyes and a reputation for trading cheap goods along the frontier. He had passed through town before, his wagon piled high with odds and ends, tools, trinkets, even children's toys. Boone set out at dawn with 2 deputies, tracking the wagon's trail across the plains. Days later, they caught up with Pike at a trading post miles from Dodge Creek. The man greeted them with a crooked smile that never reached his eyes. "What's the charge, Sheriff?" Pike drawled, leaning on his wagon wheel. Boone's eyes swept the wagon. Inside were boots, blankets, pots, trinkets, and small items that made his blood run cold. Children's shoes. A wooden doll missing an arm. A tattered cap far too small for a grown man. Pike raised his hands. All trade goods. Nothing more. Folks pay good coin for such things. Boone demanded answers. Had Pike been near the creek that night? Had he seen a boy? The drifter's replies were slippery, his grin unnerving. Children wander, Sheriff. Frontier's a dangerous place. Can't say who's to blame when one don't come home. With no proof beyond suspicion, Boone was forced to release him. Pike tipped his hat mockingly as the sheriff mounted his horse to leave. But the damage was done. News of the encounter spread back to Dodge Creek. Some were certain Pike was guilty, that he had stolen Samuel and sold him into servitude. Others said Boone had failed, letting the only suspect walk free. And in the corners of the saloon, where men spoke softer still, a different theory grew. Maybe Pike had nothing to do with it at all. Maybe the sheriff was chasing shadows while something else, something older, darker, had taken the boy. As weeks passed, Dodge Creek changed. The streets grew quieter after sunset. Parents barred doors earlier than ever, keeping children inside. Mothers walked their little ones to church with eyes darting toward every alley, every stranger who passed. The town felt different, haunted by absence. Rumors flourished in the void left by truth. Some swore Samuel had been taken by railroad men, sold to work camps out east. Others whispered of tunnels under the mine, passages that ran deeper than anyone dared map. And then there were those who spoke of things not human, theories Boone dismissed in public, though in private. He often thought of the prints by the creek. Then one morning, Boone arrived at his office to find an envelope waiting on his desk. No name, no seal, just his own written in shaky letters across the front. Inside was a scrap of paper bearing only 6 words. Look deeper. The boy is not the first. Boone read it 3 times before folding it carefully into his pocket. That evening, as he walked the length of Dodge Creek's empty Main Street, he couldn't shake the thought. What if Samuel Grady was not the town's only missing child? Sheriff Boone could not ignore the letter's warning. He began digging through old reports, yellowed notes stuffed into desk drawers, records left by his predecessor. At first, it looked like nothing more than the usual frontier chaos. Robberies, cattle theft, drunken brawls. But then a pattern emerged. Over the past decade, Dodge Creek and nearby settlements had seen more than their share of lost children. A boy gone missing while fetching water from a well. A girl who vanished while picking berries. A farmhand son last seen chasing a stray calf across the prairie. In each case, the child was never found. The townsfolk had chalked it up to wolves, to accidents, to the dangers of the frontier. But Boone, reading the brittle pages by lamplight, noticed something the others hadn't. In every report there was mention, just once, just faintly, of strange tracks near the scene. Not wolf tracks, not coyote, boot prints, and always larger than a man's. The sheriff's jaw tightened as he set down the papers. If Samuel Grady's disappearance was not the first, then the frontier was harboring something, or someone, that had been hunting far longer than anyone cared to admit. When Boone confronted a few old-timers at the saloon, they shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to the floor. Finally, one of them muttered, "Best not stir ghosts, Sheriff. This town's got a memory longer than the mine." But Boone was already stirring them. By late autumn, Boone knew he would have to return to the silver mine. The whistle found on the first search gnawed at him. It wasn't just proof Samuel had been there. It was bait, almost as if someone wanted it to be found. And the cave-in they had stopped at? Boone wasn't convinced it was impassable. So one cold evening, Boone gathered a smaller, braver posse. Men he trusted not to turn back at the first groan of timbers. They carried fresh lanterns, ropes, and spades to dig if they had to. The mine greeted them with silence. The air was colder than before, and their breath clouded like smoke in the lamplight. When they reached the collapse, they began to clear it. Hours passed. Dirt, stone, and rotted beams gave way, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Boone ducked inside first, lantern raised. What he saw made his skin crawl. The walls here were different, etched with markings not made by pick or shovel. Scratches, gouges, strange symbols that seemed too deliberate to be natural. The men behind him muttered nervously, crossing themselves. Then came the smell, a sour metallic odor, like blood left too long in the air. And then the sound, at first faint, then louder, a dragging, shuffling echo, somewhere deeper in the mine. Boone froze, every nerve alive. The men whispered, voices trembling. "What is that?" Boone lifted his rifle. "Lanterns high," he ordered, though his own voice quaked. They moved forward, step by step, until the passage opened into a cavern hollowed out by nature or hands unknown. There, scattered across the dirt floor, lay remnants of lives, small shoes, broken toys, scraps of children's clothing. But no bodies. The cavern was empty, except for the sound that still echoed. Something moving, somewhere in the dark. The men fled, stumbling back through the tunnels, dropping tools in their haste. Boone was the last to leave, his lantern swinging wildly as shadows seemed to stretch and follow. When they burst into the night, gasping under the cold stars, Boone swore to himself that he had seen something, just for a moment, lurking at the edge of the lamplight, taller than any man, and watching. The winter of 1887 fell hard on Dodge Creek. Snow buried the prairie in silence. The wind howled through the cottonwoods, and the once bustling town seemed to shrink into itself. Families huddled close to their fires, and fewer dared to travel the roads after dark. The Gradys left quietly in January, their wagon cutting a lonely trail eastward. They could no longer bear the sight of Samuel's empty chair, the sound of children's laughter that was not his. But Samuel's absence was not theirs alone to carry. Dodge Creek bore it too. Business at the saloon dwindled. The general store shelves sat untouched. Even church pews emptied, as if God himself had turned his face from the town. Sheriff Boone grew gaunt and restless. He rode the outskirts at night, lantern on his saddle, searching the prairie for signs no one else believed existed. His deputies whispered that he was losing his grip, chasing ghosts. But Boone knew better. The letter still burned in his pocket. The boy is not the first. By February, cattle began vanishing from ranches west of town. Not rustled, not slaughtered. Simply gone, leaving only the same strange tracks Samuel's case had revealed. And once, in the dead of night, a rancher swore he heard a child's laughter drifting across the snow. But when he followed it, a lantern rays, he found only silence, and a single boot print larger than his own. By the time the snows thawed, Dodge Creek was a different town. The Gradys were gone, and so too were 3 other families who could not stomach the unease that hung in the air. The once bustling saloon now echoed with only a handful of men nursing their drinks. Travelers passed through quickly, eyes wary, unwilling to linger in a place whispered to be cursed. Sheriff Boone, however, grew more relentless. He retraced every lead, every rumor. He questioned ranchers, drifters, and trappers. Most gave him nothing. Some offered too much. Wild tales of skinwalkers, of miners who had struck silver too deep and awakened something buried in the earth. And then, in early April, a new clue appeared. A shepherd boy reported finding bones out on the prairie, not far from the wagon road. Boone rode out, half expecting the remains to belong to some calf or deer. But the bones were human, too small to be a grown man, too scattered to be whole. Boone's stomach turned cold. Were they Samuel's? Or another child altogether? The local doctor could not say for certain, though he admitted the bones looked as though they had been gnawed. By what? He could not say. The whispers returned with new vigor. Some said it proved Samuel had been taken by wild animals. Others swore it was proof of the mine's curse, that something old and hungry roamed beneath Dodge Creek soil. For Boone, it was proof of something far worse. This wasn't finished. As spring gave way to summer, strange sightings plagued the town. A trapper swore he saw a figure at the edge of the cottonwoods one twilight, tall, broad, and unnatural in its gait. He said it carried something slung over its shoulder, though by the time he raised his rifle, the figure melted into the trees. A rancher's wife, waking at midnight, claimed she saw a lantern glowing on a ridge near the old mine. The light moved, stopped, then vanished. When Boone investigated, he found only more boot prints. The same large, heavy tracks, half melted into the thawing ground. The most unsettling report came from a child. 9-year-old Clara Evans, playing near her family's barn, said she heard someone calling her name. At first, she thought it was her mother, but the voice was wrong, too deep, too slow. She turned and saw a man standing at the tree-line, not a stranger. She swore it was Samuel Grady, older somehow, taller, dressed in clothes that weren't his. But it was Samuel's face. When she blinked, he was gone. Boone investigated, but found nothing. The girl insisted she wasn't lying. "He looked right at me, Sheriff," she said, her voice trembling. But his eyes, they weren't the same. The sheriff said nothing. But in his gut, he knew Dodge Creek was unraveling. By the summer of 1888, Dodge Creek was a ghost town in all but name. Families had fled, business had dried up, and even the railroad bypassed it. as if deliberately steering clear. The mine remained sealed, though Boone made several attempts to rally men to explore deeper. Each time they refused. Too dangerous. Too cursed. Boone himself changed. Once a steady, respected lawman, he grew gaunt and hollow-eyed, haunted by things he could not prove. He spoke less and drank more. By the following winter, he was gone too, vanished one night with only his rifle missing from its rack. Some said he rode out alone. Others whispered the mine had finally claimed him. The case of Samuel Grady remained unsolved. No body, no confession, no truth. Years later, travelers passing through Dodge Creek, by then little more than a cluster of decaying buildings, spoke of strange happenings. Children's laughter echoing at dusk. Lantern lights moving near the mine. Boot prints too large for any man. And sometimes, if the wind was still, the faint sound of a whistle carried across the prairie. Samuel's whistle. A sound no one ever forgot. Nobody was ever found. Some believe Samuel was taken by a traveling peddler, sold into servitude along the railways. Others swore the mine had deeper tunnels, leading to places no man dared go. The case remains one of Wyoming's oldest unsolved disappearances. Today, on cold nights, locals say you can hear a boy's laughter near the creek, just before the coyotes start to howl. What do you think really happened? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's uncover the truth together. If you enjoy true crime and untold mysteries, help this channel grow by hitting the like button. It truly makes a difference.